It seems like college rankings have been around forever. Peter, can you give us some insight into when they started?
Sure. Rankings, and I, when I talk about rankings, I'm going to talk first about U.S. News and World Report's a Guide to America's Best Colleges and Universities, because that's sort of the granddaddy of all the rankings. And we have to go back to the early 1980s to find that the market for higher education was turning in a rather dramatic way. We were moving quickly from a point of having more students than colleges could accommodate to the possibility that there would be fewer students than colleges needed. So there was a shift that was starting to develop demographically in our country that would make the whole college going process, if you will, a buyer's market. And at the same time, there was a very strong consumer orientation in our society. I remember that my wife and I would always consult a consumer's guide to whatever, to buy an appliance, to buy a car, whatever. There was that orientation to checking things out. Let's make sure that it's the best. Well, the third piece of this concurrent picture is that U.S. News and World Report, then a prominent news magazine, was struggling. I think it's pretty well known that it was not doing so well in terms of its sales, but someone within the organization had the bright idea that, hey, this is a consumer-oriented society. The whole college-going process is shifting into a buyer's market. Let's create a consumer's guide to colleges, which is effectively what U.S. News and World Report Guide to Selected Colleges and Universities became. And I believe it was in 1983 the first guide came out, and it was really rather a revelation, because there was all this talk about how you can't rank colleges. And I remember that in my particular institution, we were rehearsing all the conversations and the responses to people who would ask us about rankings. Well, you can't rank colleges, it'll go away, just ignore it, and all that sort of a thing. So it was an interesting time, but US News was the first to come out, and they've been producing annual ranking guides ever since. Shortly after that, some of other major publications came out with ranking guides, including Time and Newsweek, Atlantic Monthly, Money Magazine, Princeton Review, all wanted to get in the game, and they use different sorts of metrics and approaches to the rankings themselves. Some of them are trying to rank social life, some of them are trying to rank academic life, but I think that over the long haul, U.S. News has been the one that has probably been the standard bearer.
Got it. And, they can definitely have a big influence on the college going process overall. So, can you tell us a little bit about who they benefit most? Is it consumers? Is it colleges? And what should families be aware of when these reports come out?
Well, it's a really good question. Obviously, the rankings were intended to benefit consumers, to give consumers additional insight, some sort of metric that would enable you to put colleges in a rank order. And why would you choose to go to number 12 when you could go to number 5, and that kind of a thing. So the presumption was that this would make life easier for families. And I would add that the magazines that produced the rankings would include a lot of data that was collected from and about colleges and universities, and it would also include a lot of well-researched articles by the writers for those magazines. So there was some real consumer interest in buying this thing, and good heavens, within the first year or so, it seemed that just about every college-bound family had to have at least one issue of U.S. News, in their hands. Now, the flip side of this is U.S. News was smart. They decided to market this concept to the colleges as well. And wouldn't you like to be listed or be able to put a billboard out on the highway that says, your institution is ranked, number 10 in regional liberal arts colleges, or you're top 25% in national research universities, kind of thing. So there was a lot of marketing and packaging of information and of ranking information that was sold to colleges, and institutions realized that, you know, if it indeed was going to be a buyer's market, they had to pay attention, and they needed to buy in. So it was, the magazine editors kind of pitted the consumers and the colleges, not necessarily against each other, but they were fishing out of both sides of the boat, if you will, and making a pretty good deal out of it for themselves. The problem was this: um, the rankings perpetuated the notion that there isn't an absolute pecking order, an absolute ranking of colleges, and there really isn't, and there's really no way to achieve that. There are no metrics that allow us to do it. And what it's meant, in my opinion, is that too many families have embraced the process with the magazine and with the rankings in hand, such that they completely overlook what's most important to the student. And as a result, I think there are a lot of students and families who spend a lot of time and a lot of money going down rabbit trails trying to track down colleges that are ranked in the top of U.S. News and World Report, not to be admitted then, and then have to start all over at the end of a process when they don't have the kind of information that would be truly helpful for them. So I think that in the end, the people who benefited the most from this were the ranking editors. The magazine did quite well. I mean, that's almost 40 years ago, and U.S. News is not struggling any longer. And they've developed all kinds of other cutouts in terms of ranking, not only in education, higher graduate education, medical schools, business schools, but they rank hospitals, they rank all kinds of stuff. And they've positioned themselves well to be sort of a go-to with regard to the consumer guide to different industries. I find that deplorable because education really can't be measured that way. But and that's one of the reasons why I've been doing the work that I do with Best College Fit. It's sort of the antithesis of rankings. Let's look at the student and find what's best for the student rather than look at a ranking list.